Stretch. Come on, YouTube. Do your thing. All right. Good morning, folks. Good evening. Good night. Depends on where you're at, right? It is significantly brighter than it's been the last few weeks in the Seattle area, so it feels way earlier than my normal stream time. And even though, like, we had the daylight savings time, which I hate when they screw with the clock, you know? It just drives me crazy. But even though we had that, it doesn't feel like it should have the amount of impact it does. Like, if I look out my window right now, it's like super bright, and normally the last few weeks it's been like already kind of dark. So it's nice, right? Because it makes you feel like you're coming out of the doom and gloom. But it feels weird. Does that make sense? So I've been watching chat, and I'm not going to dive in too fast and let people get through. For the few people that see the ad and don't have an ad blocker, thank you. But but give it time to get in. I have a feeling I am going to crush the souls and dreams of some of chat tonight. And, I say that with a laugh just because I think if you've been around for a while, you probably know what I'm about to talk about. But like, there's even some great suggestions in chat. But yeah, man, this one might hurt. some folks, I get a lot of comments about this subject, right? So, man, man, it's gonna get fun. So before we go into that, Mike from the Fish Tank Barn, what's up, my buddy? He put this comment. I want to talk about it for a sec, and then I'll talk about the real topic. So from Mike, really do like the JCMP light, really like the build quality for the price. So I'm very close to finishing my final video. I've got to finish out like Filtration 101, and then I'll be doing the final video, complete with the lights that I ordered from China that I've been tinkering with, and I have some feedback about that. But overall, I generally agree with that statement. I think for a budget light, the build quality on the new generation of the JCMP light is very, very good. I think the actual power that you get from that light is also very good, and the spectrum is pretty good. It has some flaws, but it's a budget light, right? We should be expecting some level of flaw. It's not going to be perfect for a light that is really cheap. And if you got it when the big sale was going on, I mean, like the 36-inch light was like $40, right? I mean, it was cheap. It's like $42 or $47 if I remember off the top of my head. I can't remember what the exact price ended up to be, but when I first did the initial impressions video, you could get that light really cheap. It actually cost me more money to ship in ones from China than it would have been the comparison lights, that, to be clear here, right? Those ones that I ordered from China, it cost me more to ship them into the United States, buying 2 of them, than it would have cost me in that sale to buy 2 from JCMP. And that's like before they showed up, and I was able to mess with both and test the difference and that kind of stuff, right? I might give you some spoilers, but I'll go over it in the final review because I think it's worth noting. But man, like, I used to love Beamsworks as my go-to cheap light. Like, I like them a lot more than the Night Cruise or the Aquaneats. I really do like that JCMP light. I think it's definitely newer design, newer technology. The Beamswork light is getting dated, right? But I think there's some positives to the Beamswork that the JCMP doesn't do quite as well. But man, that thing is bright. It's really bright for a cheap light. And you can control it, right? You can control it to some regards. And it's a pretty reliable controller. So that's all good news. This is like spoiling half of my final video, but whatever. You guys know I'll go a little full throttle on that one. So let's talk the topic of today. Why don't you do a super detailed video on insert topic here? And we had a couple suggestions in chat already. Chillers for cold water aquariums, the Chihiros lights, right? So let me explain why I don't do these things. This is where, for some of you, I might be crushing your souls tonight, right? And I mean that jokingly. I know I'm not being cruel or anything, and I'm definitely not poking fun at the suggestions and comments at all. I would love to actually do like a full in-depth test session on some of the Chihiros, especially the Vivid 2, because that thing is a really cool light. The problem, a lot of the why don't you do an in-depth video on X, typically those super in-depth videos, like let me give you an example. I had another comment of, I'd really like to see you do an in-depth video detailing the science on each of the types of bacteria in filtration. Right? And I know like certain people are like joking, like Night Riders, kind of joking around, especially with that new comment in chat. But, and here's the problem, right? That video could be really interesting to a really, really narrow audience. And this is the one part where like I am sort of a slave to the YouTube algorithm. But it's more that I feel by making things easy and digestible, I can help a larger number of people. The time it takes to produce videos, even the simpler ones where it's kind of just my face and not like a ton of props or lots of extra shots and B-roll and all this stuff, it still takes time, right? It still takes an amount of time. And the thing about those in-depth videos is they really only help a certain number of people. And that the more narrow that becomes, basically the more that amount of time becomes really crazy if you think about it, right? Because if I go like super narrow, like I'm going to do a hyper in-depth video about anoxic bacteria and the science behind it. One, there's already a guy who's done that. That's Dr. Kevin Novak, right? Two, to do it in my style and try to make it full science-y for those people that want that, but also digestible, I'm going to lose easily like 75% of the people when I get in-depth like that, right? Now, going in-depth on a product makes sense because knowing all the pros and cons, all the potential faults, all the potential positives of a product really does matter because this is spending money. But going like super in-depth on a very expensive product, for an example, like, tell us about the UNS Titan or the Chihiro's Vivid 2. These are fairly expensive items. And I know people can argue, well, for what you're getting, most people tend to live on a budget in our hobby. But when we go super deep on some of these things, and that the audience narrows so much, this is my personal bias, is that I'm not helping enough people. Because there are people out there that cover this kind of stuff, right? Like, if you want to know about the super high-tech lighting, you're probably watching someone like Green Aqua or George Farmer or any of these guys that do these high-tech aquascapes where they're spending $3,000 on a 20-gallon tank, right? And I know that sounds extreme, but like if you watch that, was it Balash versus Tommy video where they did like the going all out and the not going all out video, the end budgets on those things were they were pretty crazy, right? And it's one of those things where I think if we try too hard to get this like super detailed information, I think it loses its effectiveness in the broadly helping Aquarius as a whole. And yes, I fully understand that it's like, this is great. From Perfect Cancer Train, thank you, from chat, right? I watched Dr. Novak's videos, but he doesn't seem very scientific. And I think part of that is just he's trying to make it easier to understand without going too deep. And yeah, you're missing like numbers and results. There's a lot of kind of anecdotal evidence, right? I totally understand that perspective, and that's kind of how I felt watching a lot of things. But at the same time, there's that inherent fear for us as creators. If we go too detailed, it just turns a lot of people off, right? Because you typically, I'm bad enough in that most of my videos are way too long. If I was like truly like playing the algorithm game, right, for YouTube, my videos are way too long. I talk in tangent too much. But the thing is, if we go so detailed, we'll help like 5 to 10 people really well. But we'll get 90 people that are just like, I don't understand what you're talking about. Make it easier to understand. So my personal approach is I want to give everybody a high level understanding, right? So instead of going to like that microscopic level, I want everybody to understand that like plants do photosynthesis versus like, okay, now the exact chemical combination that goes into the chlorophyll and it passes through this cellular wall because of this, that's so detailed that you lose a lot of people except the like most nerdy of nerdy. And which, don't get me wrong, I'm in that crowd. I love the more scientific the lectures are at my local fish club, the more they grip me. I pay a lot of attention to that stuff because usually I'm learning something. However, I think that for a majority of people who come to YouTube, and just this, and part of this is like I could go all day and play like the dumb YouTuber stuff of like, well, I've looked at the analytics and this tells me. Nobody cares about that stuff, right? But what I know is I can tell by the comments. The comments are what usually guide me. So if you're really vocal in comments, you're actually guiding a lot of my content way more than you might think. And in general, what I see is significant differences in a video like what we've been doing in Filtration 101, where I'm trying to give just the right amount of science to make it easy to understand and get that base knowledge slightly better. So that for people who maybe don't know the differences in a few things, you can learn more and more, right? And then maybe that sparks your own desire to dig deeper. I feel like if you really want the deep science, you're probably a person who wants to like go investigate it on your own. The second reason why I don't do hyper detailed hyper science videos for these specific ones, and this is me, the brutal honesty, I don't know. I don't know the hyper detailed science, and frankly, for me to learn it, I'm an auditory learner. It is very, very difficult for me to learn by reading. And this is me being really brutal to you guys, right? About myself. So let me give you an example. I don't read books for pleasure. I don't read novels of any form. And let me explain why. When I was in high school and middle school, when I had to do lots of like book reports and all that kind of stuff, I realized a pattern that is a problem for me. I had to read a book chapter by chapter, and in each of those chapters, I typically had to read the chapter 3 or 4 times to learn and retain the information in it. But if I went to one lecture, I knew it all. I'm an extremely auditory learner and a very hands-on learner. If you let me like get into a science experiment and do it hands-on, I will learn 10 times faster than I ever will by reading a scientific paper. So part of the problem for me to do a hyper detailed video on science-y things, right? We're being really generic here, is that for me to learn that information in the first place takes significantly longer than it probably does a lot of other people out there. Because this is just the way my brain is wired. Also, when you work a ton and frankly, my job is relatively stressful, it makes it even harder at the end of a day to then go and like pack your brain full of extra information, right? So part of why I don't do hyper detailed stuff, especially when it comes to science level things, is it is very, very hard for me to get that level retained in my brain to where I can talk about it freely. And my big thing is, and I've told you guys before, I don't want to fully script videos because I feel like if I fully script them, they're not me. If I talk about things more off the cusp and more in what's surface thoughts and off the top of my head, I feel like it's a little bit more of who I am as a person coming through in those videos and more of my personal experience, more especially. And that's something I personally want. That's the style, call it what you will, in my videos I want. I think there are plenty of good people who like do everything from a script and make fantastic videos. I'm not that guy. I'm just not. Now, when it comes to like certain products, usually it just comes down to cost. Like for me to buy a $300, $400, or $500 light and test it and do an in-depth review, and then now compare it to this new $300 or $400 or $500 light, or this new $200 light, or these 10 different $60 lights. Cost is a big thing, right? I only have so much fun money, you know what I'm saying, in order to do some of my stuff. So like, honestly, right now, all of my fun money is tied up, full disclosure, is sat in a savings account so that I can, when I can get certain things lined up, build a fish room and do something where I feel like I can drastically expand my capability to teach, educate, just take you guys along for a ride, etc. Run the different tests I like to do the more in-depth guides that I like to do, that kind of stuff. So like the ultimate guide for the fluval lights, I cannot tell you like the mental difference that's in my head between what will happen now when I film like around the random rooms in my house where my fish tanks are versus in a dedicated fish room space that I am designing from the ground up to be filmable the entire time. And for those that like don't necessarily know, part of my background, right? I worked in radio for a while. So part of my background is understanding audio engineering and working on making it so that the space I'm building is designed for good audio and good video. And part of the video is just learning from friends. Jimmy from the Aquarium Co-op, for example, I get lots of advice from him all the time. I had a few other friends who are professional photographers that I get advice from, or professional videographers that I get advice from. I know a few people that work in TV, doing like advertising and stuff like that. I've gotten advice from them in the past, most of which I can't execute currently, but this all goes toward a greater goal. So I could, in theory, go out and buy like every Chihiros light and a bunch of Kessels and all this stuff and review all that stuff. Or I can make it possible to make a much better fish room and use that long term rather than like one or two videos, use that long term to do not only make my fish hobby more fun for myself, but also do what I think will be higher levels of my own current content where my focus is making folks better at what they do, right? So I hope that gives you a peek into like my world and why I'm doing some of the things I'm doing. Again, YouTube is my hobby. So there's part of this too where it's like YouTube is the hobby of my hobby, right? Like fish is one of the ways that I relax from the stress that is my work. And let me tell you, I was in 4.5 hours of meetings today, and I'm going to be in another like probably 4 hours of meetings tomorrow. And at the same time tomorrow, there's across my whole team, there's 15 new people starting. And we have to figure out in a social distanced environment, how to sit them, how to train them, how to get them like one-on-one mentors with experienced people across the teams that they need to be on. It's been, this week has been a nightmare for me, right? This week and last week have been at work, but at the same time, like long term, it's really good for us, right? But I balance all that with like knowing that I have to then come home, figure out time to edit and film and all this kind of nonsense. So I look at like my long term goals of like building something that is literally designed to make filming better and easier at the same time. Trust me. You're going to like it when I get it done. And when I do get it done, there was a question earlier in chat about how-tos on building like a fish room. You will get a very in-depth series of videos on how I build my fish room whenever I build it. And like, I'm hoping some of that starts at some point this year. So I want to give you guys a peek into like why I make some of the decisions I make. And hopefully for those here, and part of it has just been, I've been so crazy busy at work. I didn't have a better topic to talk about tonight, other than I've seen a lot of comments lately on some of the videos asking for X. And I was like, I kind of want to talk about that because I make my decisions for a reason, but I haven't like really made that reason very public yet. So that's why. There you go. There's that. Okay. Let me try to catch up. So from here, at Bentley Pasco makes it super easy for me to answer stuff and all that kind of stuff. But yeah. Questions and answers. Start slamming them at me. We'll have some fun. Fish Tank Barn, the $4.99 super chat. Get yourself a coffee during that 4-hour meeting. I will get myself probably a soda because I don't drink coffee. I'm a weirdo. I live in Seattle and I don't drink coffee. I love the way coffee smells. Coffee, when it's brewing, is a fantastic aroma, but it does not taste the way it smells. And that drives me crazy because the taste, especially the aftertaste of coffee, which is extremely bitter, right? I'm not big on it. Although I do like, I've tried white coffee and I kind of like that. Mostly because it's not as astringent. I'm not trying to sound like overly posh here, but I'm really, really susceptible to certain flavors, and like strong bitter flavors is one of them. So I'm not trying to go like some Gordon Ramsay nonsense, like I have an immaculate palate. No. Certain flavors like hit me like a freight train, and really bitter tends to be one of those things. So like the aftertaste of your typical dark roast coffee, it's like getting punched in the throat for me. But like white coffee, a little more mellow. I've tried it a couple times and I've been okay with it, but it's also like usually really expensive. It's not something you just get in your break room where there's coffee, you know, just not how it works. All right, now let's answer some questions. Let's roll through. I'm gonna make sure I didn't miss anything. But yeah, man, if coffee tasted the way it smells, I'd be such an addict. I'd be like having IVs directly in my veins of that stuff. Okay. Blake Howden, do you still have your Kochu blue tetras? Would they be okay with the pistos in a 3-foot aquarium? And I saw you just repeated this question too, so I meant to. I do have a few of them left. I think I have like 5 left. They've steadily hit their old age and been slowly passing on. And they're kind of jumpy, so make sure you have a lid if you keep them. I have kept them with the pistos, and the pistos were really good at holding their own territory. Although mostly I only had them with some old like males that I basically adopted. You know, when the pistos get like old man age, they got that big like wide, huge jaw thing going on, where it looks like they just constantly hold their mouth open. I had old Manipistos like that, and they held their ground no problem with those things. So yeah, I think in a 3-foot aquarium, and I kept them in a 40 breeder, by the way, which is a 3-foot aquarium. I think you're fine. Just make sure the Apistos like have their own cave. The Kochus won't go anywhere near it. They tend to stay more like mid and top water. They're pretty good about that. But man, a good school of Kochus, they're so beautiful in person. It's hard to capture them on video correctly, but man, they're such a cool fish to watch swim. Just keep in mind they're super jumpy, so have a lid. I lost probably 10 of those dum-dums from jumping over like 4 years. But they're a really cool fish. They don't live super long. You're going to get 3 to 4 years out of them typically, but they'll get good body size to them. And that blue comes in really nice, after, like, usually you're going to get them kind of small, Wait about 6 months, man. That blue comes in beautiful, and you get those little pink dots toward the tail. Ah, man, they're gorgeous. I actually want that fish again. I've been debating whenever I get like, do my fish room and have more tanks and have a display tank. I've been debating doing another display tank of just the Kochu tetras because I love them so much. They can be jerks in really big numbers. They get a little fin nippy, but yeah, yeah, that's they're a great fish, and they'll do just fine with the pistos. Just give the pistos their place, right? Yes. Hoon Aquatics, what's up? By the way, Hoon Aquatics is somebody that like I've been casually talking to about going to, probably maybe even tour his place because he does a ton of rainbow fish breeding, which he's better than I am at this point by far, mostly because I just haven't dedicated my time. But he does a really good job, and he's got like one of the best rainbows. Period. So, pump his channel a little bit. His Instagram is pretty sweet, but. A video about breeding Wabenmuster plecos. Have you read Ancestris? The same thing. but yeah, I'll do that eventually. Where my current adult colony is, kind of terrible to film. But more importantly, I need to get, other than just generically letting plecos do their thing and feeding them well and cleaning their tank enough, there's a few things I want to do to make the tank better for filming, because right now it's bare bottom and it has tons of glare because of where it's at, right? It gets lots of indirect sunlight and stuff like that. So it's a nightmare to film right now. But the basics are really simple. Treat them just like you would any like super red bristlenose. Just keep in mind that their egg clutches are significantly smaller. So where you could get like 100 or more fish out of like an albino bristlenose or a super red bristlenose, you're going to get like 30 to 40 tops typically out of the Wabenmuster. You could realistically expect about 20 to 30 babies per clutch. And as long as you're not like being dope or working too much, or you don't have a male who always kicks a clutch of eggs out and you have to pay attention to them manually by hand, like I do, because my male's a jerk, you can reliably get like between 20 and 40. I would say safe numbers are like 25 to 30 a batch once a month. They're pretty reliable about it. And even once every 3 weeks, if you have like a really, really good male who's really, really good about bulking himself back up very quickly, which one of my boys does that very, very well. He eats phenomenally and he poops phenomenally. He makes a heck of a mess, but man, that guy, when those fish, let me tell you this, Mr. Friend, those fish, when they light up and they're trying to attract a female, they go like neon yellow. I mean, it is so crazy to watch. Because like normally when you see the males, they look kind of dark and you can barely see the honeycomb pattern on them. Those Wabenmusters, man, when that male is trying to attract a female, or at least the one that I call Bad Boy. So I have two different ones, right? I have what I call Bad Boy, and that's because his bristles are in a line like a mohawk. Yeah, I've named my plecos. What do you want from me? And then I have the other one who's got like this big, huge, like full mustache. I call him Selleck, like Tom Selleck. Bad Boy is definitely the alpha male, and both the females go for him more than they go for Selleck. So like I eventually have to split them apart to get more reliable clutches of eggs and blah, 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 blah. We know how plecos work, right? But man, when either of them two are trying to attract a female, they are like neon yellow. It looks so cool. And it's their whole body lights up. Right, and I know this is something like if you've been breeding plecos for a while, you're used to seeing this where like a lot of the plecos really put on quite a display, especially some of the more plecos that we see normally. They seem very muted. They put on quite a display of their color when they're trying to attract females in a cave. But man, with them Wabenmusters, it's night and day. Because like you'll see a little bit of yellow seam on the tail, and then when they're trying to attract a girl, it's just like, who are you and what did you do with my other pleco? They look so different. I think that's part of the allure of those fish is I see them like crazy bright all the time, and it's just like I sit and I just stare and I watch, like a complete dum dum. I'm sitting there like, is the female pleco going to notice? Just like always paying attention to it. Raphael, do you like Audible? I have personal scruples with Audible. A lot of that comes down to actually some of the very shady things they do to advertise their service. And that basically comes down to just me knowing some other people who do social media professionally and seeing some of the contracts that they've rejected based on the requirements Audible has to like sponsor channels. In general, I tend to not be in like in the past. I was not in a car that had the ability to really easily play digital media. I'd be like streaming it off my cell phone at all times, and the speakers on cell phones suck. So I don't typically use audiobooks, and a lot of that just happens to be that nowadays when I'm in traffic, I'm listening to YouTube. So I tend to be consuming like some of the YouTube channels I can listen to really well, and I don't need to watch. So some examples would be like some of the tech and camera reviewers. I like listening to some of their stuff to get some general ideas of maybe other things I might look into in the future, or whether or not like I should even pay attention to a piece of technology that's coming out. I listen to them purely audibly. I basically don't need to look at things. I can tell based on the ones that I like what's going on just based on what they're talking about. But yeah, it's how I consume media these days. Like, I know there's probably tons of novels that I would enjoy in like fantasy novels and stuff like that. It's just, if I do that, I'm losing out on time to pick up on like news or information or stuff like that that is probably more relevant in my life than than pure enjoyment. I'm a weirdo, I know. Melissa Foster, I knew it. Your voice is great for radio. Yeah, it's okay. I mean, it's not. It is not as good as some. There are some fantastic voices in radio out there, but I love to talk. Obviously, I wanted to originally when I was going into radio, I wanted to be an afternoon guy. So I wanted to be that person that like lets you mellow out from your day on your drive home from work. That was my goal. And then I realized that radio would basically have me making not very much money for 10 to 15 years, hoping for a chance. And my brain said, you can figure out something somewhere else that makes you more money, so that you don't like live on ramen for the next decade, or just, can actually like have a home, support your hobbies, things like that. So yeah, otherwise I'd probably be in like Bend, Oregon or something like that, kind of out there still trying to find my way for my shot. But I used to own a mobile DJ company. So like, high school dances and youth groups and all that kind of stuff. I used to do that in high school and college. I owned my own small business doing that, until I just got tired of, having kids ask for the same like 5 songs over and over and over again. Drove me crazy. And anytime I put on like my own like carefully mixed sets of music that I did some like more professional DJ work on, having them just not be appreciated whatsoever. It's like, I don't want to do this anymore. And I wasn't at the level that would have put me into like, serious clubs or anything like that, because I didn't spin too much like electronic music. Omar, I personally think that those are two different things. I can't read. With different goals. Why not set up an automated fish room and leave a tank or two that may change over time? Just a thought. So, okay, let me dig in on this, because you're actually not far off from what I'm doing. So, like, a good amount of my fish room will be designed for like breeding fish and that part that I enjoy, right? Then there's a portion of my fish room that will be display tanks, and those will most likely change very minimally over time. Then there's an area that is designed specifically for consistently testing products, putting them head to head against other products, and kind of delivering the product side of things that I enjoy doing for fun, right? So, and that can change because that can also become lessons on how to grow plants or how to do this or how to do that. So there is I have a lot of things mapped in my head. I actually have like a weird sketched blueprint. It's not very accurate because there's a lot of things I have to do to make it correct first. A lot of it just involves like getting out and getting my garage empty so I can lay tape down and start figuring out exactly how much space I have. But basically I've designed in my head portions of my fish room to cater to specifically YouTube. And then I have other portions that are catered to my want to raise more baby fish and do it in a way that works with my work schedule, because what I'm doing currently does not. And then 3 is having display tanks. Display in big quotation. We're not talking these like hyper aquascape tanks. You guys know I don't do that stuff. But nicer looking tanks to me, planted tanks to display certain fish that I really enjoy, aka a lot of rainbows and the guppies, right? So those will be the things that like I want some tanks that are just there for my appreciation, nothing more. But I will also make those tanks pretty and make part of building those tanks a process that is visible on YouTube and made to teach some different lessons too, right? So like one tank almost assuredly will be nothing but epiphyte plants, to show that like you can do only epiphytes and make something look really, really cool. And then also realize that like it has almost zero maintenance other than water changing, and if you need to, like, paying attention to algae. But as long as you set it up correctly, you get basically no algae. You get a ton of growth, and you can basically just trim off your growth and leave everything else in place because they're epiphytes. And you could sell those like plants for profit style, and you're just easy peasy, done. You have a beautiful tank that needs very little work. Right? Sounds good. And then you have the difference of like, what does a tank look like if we put all green fish, like Wanamensis, for example, spoiler alert, with red plants. Lots of red plants and not as many green plants to focus on pushing the color of that fish to our eyes. So these are things that like I plan to do. This is long-term plans. And maybe, just maybe, I'll do something really crazy. I haven't figured that part out because, again, I need to get into that space, get it empty to be able to mess around and do the stuff I want to do. There's that chat jump. Been waiting for that one. I know I was way behind on chat, but it wasn't jumping at all. Now I gotta scroll back a little bit. All right. Blake, we got your question. I hope that answered it for you, by the way, Blake, about the Kochu Tetras. If not, shoot me something else in chat. Brad, what's up, buddy? Bentley, want to say thanks. I've seen a huge turnaround on my plants from your advice. Excellent. Question, how often do I need to replace phosphate removal media? Can it be cleaned and reused? So no, it can be cleaned and reused. The media does use itself up. And the phosphate removal is actually a type of chemical filtration, right? Just like there's ammonia removing pads, there's like carbon infused pads, stuff like that. They're all types of chemical filtration. The pad will still keep like filtering particulates out, but its ability to remove phosphates diminishes over time. Typically, I would say, depending on how many fish are in there, a month to 2 months is how long it's going to be. That's why you get those big pads and you try to only cut little chunks out, and just a small amount is what you need to help remove those excess phosphates. And you can use that big pad and just slowly cut chunks of it to make it last over time while you make small adjustments in the tank in order to bring the phosphates down naturally so that they're just in check long term. I hope that makes sense. But I actually, for a while in this particular tank, I used to use phosphate removing pads really early when I was getting back into the hobby and just hadn't like cracked the code mentally on like my local water and all that kind of stuff. Orphan Slayer, I just went on vacation and left my planted tank, no fish, unattended. I'm worried that I'm going to come home to an algae explosion. Should I just turn down the lighting because I'm not dosing ferts? So there's a couple things you could do. A, you could get a doser, an auto doser, and let it dose ferts for you. Or B, what I would actually do is I would definitely turn down stuff, and you could look at putting some root tabs in, because like everything's going to have some roots, and they'll absorb some small amount slowly, and that should help kind of keep everything happy. It depends on how long your vacation is. I mean, if it's only like a week, I wouldn't worry about it too much. If it's like a month, then yeah, it's a little different, right? So it depends on the duration of the vacation, how long you're away. But in general, yeah, just don't fertilize for a week. Turn your lights down. Make sure you're still getting light, right? Because no light is bad. But just even if you're like at 100% and you dial it down to like 65, you should be okay. Bates and genetics. Coffee is acidic because of tannins. Yes. Matthew Schmidt. I won those orange rainbow fish from Marcel. I'm super excited about them. Ooh, so you mean the Calimoises? I'm hoping. There's actually several orange fish that Marcel carries, but yeah, I hope that's the Calimoises. I absolutely love that fish. They're gorgeous little fish. I say little. I mean they get good size. They get like, but yay, long term a big male. He gets kind of a torpedo-y body like a Parkinsoni, not quite as tall, but man, when they light up, they're so beautiful. Ruth, that's me. Coffee smells great. Don't like the taste, so I drink green tea. I like green tea, but it's not something I have easily accessible at work, and most of what I drink at work is that. What I really love, Costco has their own version of like the vitamin water zeros. They call it like Vitarain. They have a tropical mango version. Well, I love that stuff. But my Costco keeps selling out of it when I go shopping. So like for the last month, I haven't been able to buy any, which makes me really sad because I like having the lower calorie, like nice tasting stuff. Like I'll drink water occasionally, example here, but usually I want something with a little flavor to it because I'm such a spoiled boy, and it keeps me from drinking soda if I have something with flavor but is like 0 calorie or extremely low calorie. It hankers that. There's like one of my problems is like I love soda, so it hankers that want to drink soda away. It's a trying to slowly control a vice, right? So that I can like, I don't know, be slightly healthier. TJ Autocross. Should my Amazon sword plants go through root tabs like crazy? Yes. Seems like they grow a couple days after and then start growing brown. Adding tabs weekly now. Yeah, depending on how big the plant and its root system grows, they will chew through root tabs. One thing you can look into... Let me try and look them up. There's a specific root tab that I used to use for a while that I want to see if they're still on Amazon. My brain was just like, I don't know, that place where you buy stuff, even though you shouldn't, because that company's crushing small business, but we'll stay away from those, right? We'll stay away from that conversation. Can't remember. They're called like Aqua Grow, if I remember right, but they're real weird. They might not be on there anymore. So they're a much larger, like big disc-shaped clay-based root tab, and they take significantly longer to get eaten up than, say, like a flourish root tab or the capsule root tabs, like the aquarium co-op ones. Those can work, but honestly, like aquarium co-ops root tabs are pretty cheap, or there are ways to get root tabs cheaper that aren't quite as expensive. I'm not saying like doing Osmocote. I personally am fully against Osmocote root tabs, but plenty of people use it, right? There's ways to get root tabs a little cheaper that can make it so that, you know, if you're doing once a week, you don't really care. It's almost this, it would be basically the same as costing you doing a liquid fertilizer at that rate. And that's just what you got to weigh out. Like, they will eat a ton. If you let some of the mulm from your fish naturally get down in there, they'll feed on that too. And there's a couple other things you can kind of do to help deal with that, but in the end, Amazon sword, once it gets to a certain size, they just consume like crazy. That's just what that plant does. That's a Stephen P. I find that 7 or 8 tablespoons of sugar really brings out the best in any cup of coffee. Oh, that sounds like my kid brother. Let me tell you a story about my kid brother. So my kid brother is significantly younger than me. He's 11 years younger than I am. And when he was younger, he would order like a Coke at a restaurant. And then he would take the packets of sugar off the table and pour sugar into his Coke. Or Pepsi, or whatever cola, right? You talk about, like, things that, like, I'm a big guy. I've always been a big guy my whole life. Those are things that made me go, like, what are you doing? What are you doing, small boy? Took a lot to get him to stop that, but thankfully, like, he actually has decent teeth, too. Like, you would think his teeth would just be destroyed by that much sugar, but... The little things you remember about your younger life, right? That you remember about your siblings or family members, right? It's always the weird stuff. The Jossie experience. Hello, sweetie. Papa Limo is quite interested in this beef Wellington that Gordon Ramsay cooked up. Yeah, if we haven't joked, I mean, like, for those that don't know, I've told lots of stories about how Danger Noodle loves watching Gordon Ramsay shows, and it's one of the things that my lady and I watch a lot of times when we're like eating dinner. So like if there's a new Hell's Kitchen or any of those, we tend to watch those shows just because we enjoy them a lot. But yeah, our dog is like Papa Limo is probably the greatest beggar known to man, at least in our lives. So yeah, we look at things like if I cook a steak or something, man, he is just on top of my knee at all times. Like I'll be sitting and we're eating, right, and he's just like on my knee, like, me, share, sharing, dad, share. He's such a beggar. I spoil my dogs. Do not get me wrong. I spoil my dogs, but I try to do so healthily, right? So like I don't give them, the stuff they're not supposed to eat. But like, like if we cook chicken or we cook beef or something like that, we purposely put a small amount. We split it between all the dogs and make sure that they get a little bit as a kind of a treat, right? I especially do that when I cook steak or if I'm cooking chicken breast, for example. Those are the two that I tend to do the most. Yeah, there's lots of comments about radio. That, yeah, you're all correct. Everything you guys are talking about is very correct. Kyle's Aquarimetrics. I think I got it again. Just got orange Venezuelan Cories for the first time today. Anyone else keep them? They are amazing. I can't believe it took me this long to go and try them. Man, I struggle between the orange Cories and the black Cories from Venezuela because I love the way both of them look. I love the super dark black Cories and how you just have the little hints of orange in the tail, and then all the orange in the body is just so pretty. It's one of those things where I kind of bounce back and forth between the two of like if I'm going to do a big school of Cories at some point, which one I want to do. It's very hard for me to decide because I love both those Cories a ton. Oh no, chat keeps jumping. That's how I know I'm way behind. Mike Kinseth, thanks for the sticker, man. I greatly appreciate it, especially with the shades and this small smile. I can dig that. I definitely like. I have a pair of prescription sunglasses coming soon, so that I can not be like doing this whenever I drive in the sun in my current glasses. Like, thankfully, my prescription is still almost exactly the same for like 3 years running now. So I was like, can I just get some prescription sunglasses instead of actual glasses? And they're like, yeah, you can do whatever you want with your prescription, but do you want to upgrade your regular ones? I'm like, well, the difference is really minimal. Like, well, as long as the doctor doesn't mind, I don't care. We'll sell you whatever you want to buy. It's like, I would like prescription sunglasses, please. I have blue eyes. They're really light sensitive. All right. I'm curious. Is it supposed to be Oliver or Olivier? I've always been curious. I've never asked you directly. But Pasco, do you have an explanation for random fish loss? I lost one of my 13 rummy nose and everything was looking fine. So, I mean, generically speaking, no, I definitely could never answer that question. A lot of times, like, little stresses, and it depends on how long you had the fish, and there's like a million things to consider that are outside of what we would normally be like, well, I looked at my nitrates, my nitrites, and my ammonia, and they were all fine, that we might not consider. I generically, up until my Kochu tetras, I've had really, really bad luck with tetras in general. I swear I'm just cursed with tetras, except the Kochus. The Kochus did phenomenally for a very, very long time. I kept a very big school for basically 3 years until they all kind of got old and started to pass away from age. And you can tell that they're just old men tetras, right? Or old lady tetras. But, you just see it in them. And it's one of those things where, like, I've always had trouble with neons, with cardinals. I haven't done very well with, I had, like, I think glow light tetras at one point that I inherited from someone. There's a couple other, I've had some emperor tetras that just, yeah, I've never done super well with tetras, which makes me sad because I love the way a lot of tetras look. So I'm probably the worst person to answer that question because I'm terrible at tetras. And I will fully admit it. I think that's one of the things that's important, is that I know what I'm bad at, even though I keep trying because I want to not be bad at them. I like rubbing noses a lot, and you could have just one fish was stressed and it decided not to eat for a while, and then because it was stressed and it hadn't been eating, a natural bacteria that fish always just deal with anyway took over and could have caused the death. There's a myriad of reasons that can happen with fish. That's the problem about being a fish keeper, is a lot of times things will die and we can't really figure out why. And then every other fish will do okay. As long as you don't start seeing like slowly losing more fish, it's probably just something to do with some level of stress from when you got the fish and XYZ, right? There's a myriad of tiny reasons that can all compound on each other and cause us to lose a fish for foreseeably no reason that we just don't understand, right? There's a lot of stuff there. That's the sucky part. Raphael, you help us all so much, but what is one thing in the hobby or YouTube you wouldn't mind to get some help yourself? This is a really cool question. Raphael, thank you so much. I appreciate this question. So I've kind of notoriously said how bad I am at shrimp. And I think that's one of the things that, like, I think I just have to, like, there's some changes I have to do that require, like, a very dedicated setup and, like, going it the most, like, slow, meticulous way possible to get better at shrimp. But actually, what I would eventually like to get better at is very simple. I want to be better at, it will require some help, and I've been doing this on the side of researching a lot of things. I want to get better at so not like your whiptail cats or anything like that. I want to get better at breeding Corydoras, because I like Corydoras a lot. And one thing that I've learned is that rainbows and Corydoras actually do really well together raising up. I've watched a lot of people that I trust very, very strongly, and raising baby Corys with baby rainbows at the same time has this really great, like, symbiotic relationship. And you can do the same thing with shrimp, but eventually the rainbows get big enough that they'll pick off the shrimp, and that's a problem. But they'll never pick off the Corys, right? And there are several Cory species that I really, really like that I know are breedable, but I'm terrible at breeding them because I've, one, probably never done a dedicated setup for them. That's probably my biggest problem. But two, I've only had a couple of babies show up in my Corys by pure accident. And I want to be really clear. With these two babies, they're both just generic bronze Corys. And my girlfriend, if she was still in chat, she could attest to this. Every time I see them, and I've been watching them slowly grow up, I'm like a little kid in a candy store. I'm like, there's the baby Corys. Look, they're swimming together. Or like, look, there's one. Look, there's one. I'm such an idiot. Whenever I see them in the 75 long, where Danger Noodle is, right? I'm such an idiot when I see those two babies, because they're the two that made it. And I've never seen more, so it's not like I lost some. I've only ever seen those two. And I saw them when they were like just itty bitty, like maybe a quarter of an inch in size. And they've made it all the way, and every time I see them doing their little like wiggle, yeah, kind of dance that Corys do, right? That little wiggle butt motion that Corys have when they swim. Yes, I'm a psychopath. If you have not detected this yet, now you know. I get so jazzed about baby Corys. I don't know why they're so interesting to me. I think it's because their swim motion is just so unique. It's kind of like clownfish. That's the other thing. The other thing that I would want to do is learning how to keep clownfish correctly. That's the only saltwater fish I want to keep. I don't care about anything else, just clownfish. And it's because I love, kind of like how people can get really obsessed with like how discus babies feed off of the slime coat of their parents. Like, that's a big thing that Master Breeder Dean is really into. That's one of the interactions that really got him into fish. I love how clownfish host an anemones and the way that they live and raise their young, and their natural defense mechanisms by using anemones and those kind of like stinging type coral to protect them from predators. I love that, like the science behind that. And the one thing that I would want help with is learning how to properly keep them so that I could keep some clownfish in anemones in a tank. And it's all I care about. That's literally the only thing in saltwater I'd ever want. You give me like a 700-gallon saltwater tank, and it would just be nothing but clownfish. because it's the only part of saltwater. I mean, yeah, you probably like cleaner wrasses and the cleaner fish that you need to have to keep your corals safe, right? But just, I would only care about clownfish. That's like how like psychotic my enjoyment of saltwater is in that one fish type. Although, to be fair, my buddy who keeps reefs, I've talked about him before. We had the video a long time ago where we've had Freckles, the bamboo shark, or actually, sorry, she's a coral cat shark, not a bamboo shark. I do like the small reef sharks like those, like coral cats and bamboos. I think they're really cool. I would never want to keep them personally because they're very delicate animals when they're young, and they take a very, very smart person to raise them correctly. Which is why there's wonderful people like Keith, right? He knows how to do that stuff, and he's doing that now. He's raising it's a specific species of bamboo shark. Really, really cool. He sent me some new pictures like 2 days ago of his young one that's like, I think like a month old at this point, or a month and a half, fairly recently hatched from its egg. Yeah, I just went really deep on like dumb saltwater stuff. But this is why like my buddy Darren, Rogue Aquariums, like I talk to him pretty regularly because I get to like little peeks into the saltwater world, and it just satiates just enough to where I don't go crazy and try to like keep saltwater in my house on top of all the other like stuff I'm trying to do right now. Oh man, it's just I can be such a mess at times. Chat. I'm so behind. John Kim. Hello, Bentley. I have rainbows in an acrylic tank with black background and faded white gravel substrate. Do rainbows tend to brighten with darker substrate? Yes, so rainbows will have far more intense saturation of color in dark substrate, dark background. It naturally causes them to show their color more. If you have lighter substrates or like clear backgrounds, they're not going to intensify that color as much, so you won't see that like super dark color that you can see at some of like the big rainbow nerds who like have like all but just the front glass blacked out basically. Dark substrate really does help you. It helps a ton. Yeah, I recognize it's a French name, but like even putting it like that, I don't know. I'm hoping that that's Olivier, as opposed to like Oliver that we would do in like, English for us ignorant Americans. The sad part is like another weird tangent here. The only reason I know the one pronunciation of that is spelled like that is Olivier is because of an anime. And because one of my favorite characters is named Olivier in that show. For those that are curious, that would be Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood. That's the older sister of Major Armstrong, Olivier Armstrong, the general of the North. She's an absolute bad A, and I love her to death. She makes me giggle inherently. Mike Stambaugh, didn't you read pygmy rainbows before? How big do they have to be before they spawn, and do they go after their fry bad? So here's the thing. I have not bred the pygmy rainbow. Master Breeder Dean was trying to do that. They really only have to be about an inch before they'll start throwing eggs. Now, usually you want to get them closer to like that 2-inch size so that their eggs are a little bit bigger and more stable. When they're really small and throwing eggs, you get less eggs, for one. And two, those eggs aren't quite as... You know how it is when you pick rainbow eggs, like they have a certain firmness to them? When they're younger, those eggs aren't quite as firm. So you have a little bit more risk to accidentally break an egg. That being said, I don't know how much they go after fry. Like, it's weird. So, like, the Aves Creek Bosemani, Hoon Aquatics, who was in here earlier, he's had tons of videos where, like, his adults just live with his babies. They don't touch them at all, from what he's seen. They just raise them inside the same tank. And it's not like it's a huge tank. Just no problem. Parents just ignore them, let them go. And there's other fish that do that. I'm not sure if the pygmy rainbows do that, right? They're small, so maybe, but at the same time, like, they could just be just as dumb as all the other big rainbows and be like, oh, look, eggs, those are tasty, and eat them. Or like, oh, look, that little thing swimming there, that must be some kind of insect, not my babies, and eat them. Because rainbows are dumb. But, yeah, I personally haven't kept pygmies. I like them, but when I'm like, how to put this? When I learned to start controlling my collectoritis a little bit, pygmy rainbows is one of the ones that I nixed off my list. because I knew Master Breeder Dean had them, was going to be breeding them. So I could get them at some point later. And then he had troubles with rainbows at his place. I think it's because just his water ends up, in his auto change system, his water ends up too soft for them to like really do really well. And even I've been seeing some little problems with that in my personal tanks lately. I've had some trouble trying to like do some random get my fry going to kind of get back in the habit, and just been bad. Dave from Iowa, what cories would you put in a 20-gallon with platies and swordtails? I plan to put mystery snails in also. Man, that tank is potentially going to cause a ton of mess because mystery snails are super hungry. Me personally, it depends on whether it's a 20 long or a 20 tall, right? I think in a 20 long, I would be more likely to look at, and I fully admit I have expensive taste, either Adolphoi cories, because I love that white, or if you want to go a little cheaper, panda cories, right? Or just like the atypical standby that I think is absolutely one of the most beautiful cories is stir-by. I love stir-bys. Now, if you want the smaller cories, I would look at the Hubrosas. I think they're the cooler of the small cories. But I would still probably look at something more like a Adolphoi if I want to go a little more fancy, or the panda cory, just because they're so adorable. They're such an adorable little fish. I can't help it, man. They're cute. It's just how it is. Bob Purcell, is water wisteria primarily a root feeder or a water column feeder? So it's interesting. That plant really, really feeds from the roots. But I grow all of mine floating. So I basically have aerial roots effectively in the water column. The thing is, like, water wisteria grows like a rosette plant. It grows more like a crypt than it does like a typical stem plant. And realistically, it's a fern, right? So in a sense, it's like the most aggressive Java fern known to man. So it feeds technically from its roots, but very well can handle from the water column, as opposed to where we think of like crypts, where it's like more in the substrate itself. So I hope that that helps, you know. Yeah. They can do both. They just grow like crazy. Joyce. Hi, I have a new baby pandas, a 1/4 inch and less, up to adults now. I have about 20 and new eggs in the glass. Love my little zoomies. Yeah. I actually saw a guy locally who was selling, I think he has like 25 panda cories that have been breeding in this tank. And I sat there, I was like, I need room. I need room because I want them. Because like he has to break down his tanks. But yeah, man, it's one of those things where like I look at certain fish and I have to restrain myself, knowing that I'm already like packed to the gills as is with my fish. But yeah. JR BM or Junior BM, maybe. I have 3 questions. A little later. I'll get to him in a sec. Joe Davis, what's the deal with Corydoras releasing a toxin when stressed? So part of when they're stressed, right, it puts a natural defense mechanism into place. All Corydoras carry a specific neurotoxin. It's their defense mechanism. And the problem is that in the wild, the water is moving so fast that that little defense mechanism, that neurotoxin, will stun whatever predator is like tried to bite down on them. Because right there, they're an armored catfish. You can put that in quotation marks. They're not like armored armor, but some of them are kind of armory compared to, say, like others. Definitely not like a Pleco, where we think of like those big like plates, but they really are an armored catfish in some way, shape, or form. That neurotoxin is enough to stun whatever predators attack them so they can get away. The problem is, in an aquarium, we don't have that massive continuous water change effectively happening, so that neurotoxin disperses really fast. And most commonly, this happens when we bag and try to ship them. They get stressed from that process. They release that neurotoxin into the water. It's got nowhere to go. And now that neurotoxin is affecting all the other cories get stressed. They add more neurotoxin. A chain reaction of doom, right? Certain cories are much better at shipping, others aren't. There's actually a great talk of a guy who visits clubs. That's Eric Thomas. I'll make sure it's not wrong. Yeah, Eric Thomas, who's been studying this and the neurotoxin in Corydoras and the effect and how it comes. And they come from a couple, depending on the type, there's a few different ones, right? But man, it sucks for hobbyists, right? Because it can be really bad when we bought this new Cory, we're really, really interested, and they show up dead because of the neurotoxin. One of the ways that you help deal with this, typically in shipping Corydoras, and we'll be finishing up very soon. I know I'm getting way more verbose than I should, but one of the ways that we help deal with this is we basically try to stress them out and then immediately move them to a fresh, clean bag so that the neurotoxin gets expelled in like a bucket of water, right, or some other thing, and then they get moved into the bag they're going to be in permanently. And once they've expelled it, they're done for a while. It takes a while to rebuild that, and then they're safe, and you're not going to have that neurotoxin in the water when they ship. But yeah, that neurotoxin sucks, man. And stir-by are one of the few that are just notorious for being rock solid, never have problems. But then you have panda Corys. Joe Davis is mentioning this, in which I'm very sorry for your loss. When you ship panda Corys, they are a little more likely to do this to themselves. And no, Eric Wyrock, it's not Eric Bodrock. Eric Bodrock is a fantastic breeder. He's not the scientist actually studying the neurotoxin. That is actually a gentleman named Eric Thomas. The only reason why I had to think about it, so we had Eric Lucas, who's a shrimp guy, and then Eric Thomas, Dr. Thomas, he's a legit biologist doctor, down in, I think it's the San Diego area of California, if I remember correctly. But yeah, he's super cool. He's a super nice guy. I think he even does some amount of YouTube. I have to look it up. I'll look it up. One sec. See if I can. Oh, a very different Eric Thomas comes up when I look him up, but I'll try and find it and put it in a community tab post later. But he came and spoke to my club. It was just absolutely I zeroed in. It was all the science about it. I was thrilled. It was such an interesting thing to learn about because I think Corys are adorable, and I had no clue the details on what was going on with that. Danikin helping out. Thank you. Okay. Junior, my ram is pooping a whitish clear long poop. I dosed for parasites a week ago. Just Prazi Pro. Still doing the same. Water parameters are all good. I'm thinking maybe internal bacterial problem. Dosed Prazi twice. 5 days water change, another 5 days water change. Up until today is perfectly fine. Eating, swimming around. Today he seems to want to hide a lot more and is breathing heavy. So there's a chance white poop just means some form of stress, right? Typically we associate that with an internal parasite of some form. And that's because usually it's the parasites that are going to cause that. They're eating all the extra stuff and our fish aren't getting something, but sometimes it can be bacterial. One thing I would try to do is if that fish is still eating, see if you can find a food that's heavy in garlic and help get that in there. And then there's ways to get medicated foods if you can. If not, there's ways to lightly medicate your food, which I think Prazi Pro actually has a way to dose that in its instructions, if I remember correctly. It's been a while since I've looked at the bottle of Prazi Pro, but if it's bacterial, try to treat for bacterial. The biggest problem is make sure any internal bacteria almost guaranteed is gram negative, and what that means is that erythromycin won't work. Erythromycin is built for gram positive bacteria. Gram negative bacteria requires something like metronidazole or kanamycin, neomycin, which is also Neoplex, Canaplex. Metronidazole is just most commonly known as Metro. It's a pretty common fish med. You can look at something like the stronger stuff like Furin and Furin 2. There's a lot of stuff out there. Make sure that if you are doing any antibacterial, metronidazole is the first one I'd actually go to personally, just because it's a really effective broad spectrum medication. Make sure that it is effective against gram negative bacteria. While Cory and the Aquarium Co-op gang, they love the med trio. A lot of the bacterial infections that we deal with internally in fish, as opposed to external bacteria that can cause problems, tend to be gram negative, and erythromycin doesn't hurt that stuff. So erythromycin is really good at dealing with things that could be more generic yuck on the outside of a fish as opposed to like deeper problematic internal bacteria stuff. That internal bacteria is almost always gram negative, and thus erythromycin is not effective. It does nothing, and you won't save your fish. Whereas something like metronidazole, or one of the ones that attacks gram negative bacteria, can be effective. And you can't always guarantee it's going to do the thing, right? But hopefully you can get it fixed. There's also some better, other than praziquantel, which is what Prazi Pro is, there's some better antibacterials. One thing you might look at doing, honestly, is look at levamisole. Levamisole is super, super effective, especially against worms, and it's easy to dose. You could also look at, like the easiest way to get that is Select Aquatics. That's Greg Sage's company. He's got perfect dosing instructions, makes it easy peasy. Another thing you could look at is the deworming medications for dogs. So it's Panicure C, like one package of that very easily does a certain amount. It's very easy to get on Amazon. You can get it like next day, basically. That's another one you could look at. Very typically, what in my experience, when you have that white poop, right, it's almost always some kind of internal worm. Not necessarily a specific other parasites, but usually worms of some form. And so what you want is a good dewormer, because the most of the deworming medications, what they do is they paralyze the worms. They don't actually kill them, to make it so that they can't keep themselves inside the fish's body. And that helps the fish pass those worms. And then what you need to do is very thoroughly gravel vac. Right? You water change, and typically you dose again. Because what you want to do is re-paralyze them, and they can die down there by being paralyzed long enough. But you want to make sure that you're getting all those parasites out, those worms, so that your fish aren't re-getting the problem by trying to eat them out of the gravel or something like that. So it's a little more detailed maybe than it needs to be, but I hope that helps get you on the right path. Because losing a fish to any kind of parasite or bacteria always sucks, especially if you're like, you've been trying to treat it and it seems like nothing's working. It might just be that the treatments you're using aren't addressing the problem as effectively as they could if you used a different treatment. So hopefully, JR or Junior, depending on what it's supposed to be, that helps you out. I hope. Okay, gang. I'm going to do like one more question. And then we will get running away, because in theory, Dr. Black's supposed to be up next in like 3 minutes. And as we know, one question for me is usually like 10 minutes. But we'll do one more just in case he's running a touch late or something like that. Yeah. So Bare Bottom Aquariums, just a comment. I'll read it, because maybe I'll give a second for a question to show. But why I love Dan's fish, style of shipping, one fish per bag, just got a great haul of Selby's Rainbows, Orange Fellow Sway Quarries, and a Sultan Pleco. Ooh, a Sultan Pleco. Me gusta. I like the Selby's Rainbows. He's got a couple of stuff. You know, it's funny. Instead of a question, actually, I'm gonna say this. So over the weekend, I had a conversation with a business. I'm gonna leave it really generic. So I was offered a position completely outside of my current field, so outside of tech. And I have to leave this really generic because I'm under confidentiality from this, right? So it was very intriguing, the offer. I want to be very clear here. But part of the problem is it's a startup. It's a small business. And most small businesses, right, they just can't afford to pay a ton of money to begin with. They usually offer something like partial ownership in a company or stock or whatever that certain thing is that long-term makes it worthwhile. And, I was given an offer that, were I in a different situation or a different time in my life, I probably would have took in a heartbeat, because it's something that interests me from a passion perspective. And no, it's not Fluval, just in case anybody's wondering if, like, finally, Fluval offered Bentley a job because of all his videos. No, it was not Fluval. That's a giant company. The Rolf C. Hagen company is massive. But I was offered a gig. Basically, what it came down to is just it doesn't fit what is necessary for me to live currently, right? So, instead, I might end up consulting for that company, a very, very part-time manner, just kind of giving some advice based on the position that I was offered, which, for those that don't know, before I got into tech, I used to work in marketing. And I used to do... I basically ran all of the advertisements. We refer to it as generically as creative, but all the advertisements, both digital and printed, for a relatively large, at the time, online flooring retailer. So I worked in wood flooring. Very exciting, I know. But when I worked there, right, I was managing several remote teams. Like I had a team of graphic artists out in the Philippines. I had another team of graphic artists that specifically did like newspaper circulars and stuff like that in Georgia that I worked with. I had people locally that I worked with for creating different stuff for like affiliate marketing and like all this kind of all this crazy stuff, right? And I worked with product teams to select products for all the different sales, and basically I like to do what I call it. I like to control chaos, is what I like to call it, because it was a very like hectic job, and this is back in my like 20s. So you know, I was younger, had a lot more energy too, but it was something going back into that realm, into marketing, and I thought it was very interesting that I got reached out to, and it was the only reason that person reached out to me. YouTube. Because at some point, they share a hobby with We Fish fan people, and had watched enough of my stuff to learn that I had done marketing in the past, and then went and looked up and found a resume of mine that was old enough that still showed all my marketing information. Yeah, they did like some forensic work, right? Interesting, isn't it? All because of a hobby, which I think is super cool. But in the end, I'm still in my like crazy psychotic tech job that I love to death, by the way. If I haven't made that clear, I love what I do. It just can be a little crazy paced. So, I think Dr. Black is coming up next. Let me get a link for Dr. Black's channel, because he's a sweet dude, my Aussie buddy. Make sure if he's actually coming up. I don't know. I don't see like a thing coming, but just in case, we'll like link his channel, because that's what we do. I'm pretty sure he was supposed to, but maybe he's not tonight. Feel free to check out Dr. Black. Usually he's on after me, but might not be this week. And we're gonna call it a day tonight, folks. Again, if you do have questions I didn't answer them, please feel free. I'm gonna put my email in chat. It's bentley.pasco@gmail.com. Spelled exactly like the YouTube channel. That's my name and all that kind of good jazz. Shoot me an email. I'll get back to it. I've actually like caught up on my email, so I'm trying to respond as fast as possible, although this week's a little hectic at work. But I did a lot of like email over the weekend to catch up and try to help, make sure I can help some people. So, with that being said, I hope you all have a fantastic evening. I think my chat like died because I haven't seen chat updated in several minutes. So, if you had a question, please just shoot me an email. I'll be happy to get back to you guys. And if all else fails, I'll see you next week. Same bad time, same bad channel. Tuesday, 6 p.m. Pacific. We'll be here. We'll have another live stream until, 7-ish o'clock. And as always, guys, thank you so much for watching. And stay awesome. Remember, you never know. Your hobby might turn into your next job. Mine almost did. Crazy stuff, right? Crazy stuff.